We will start with an overview of SQL Server 2016 and what people are saying about this release, as well as the official statement from Microsoft. Reviewing the new features, we'll discuss the difference between an enhanced feature and a completely new feature to the product. There is a difference. You need to understand the explanation about how releases have changed in SQL Server, especially the every 2-year cycle. The additions can always be confusing because each new release changes the structure of these additions. 2016 has gotten rid of the Business Intelligence Edition, and now there's really just two main editions, Standard and Enterprise, along with two other editions, Web and Desktop. There is still a Development Edition, which has everything Enterprise has, except you do not get a license for a production version. Also, there's still the Local DB Edition. System requirements are always important, and the requirements for installing SQL Server 2016 have changed, especially as concerning the operating system. This needs to be a part of your installation checklist before you start working with SQL Server. There's additional services and changes to the accounts used to run these services that you need to be aware of. More exciting than anything released in the last probably 10 years is Service Pack 1 for SQL Server 2016. This service pack enables most programmability options in all editions, giving you a consistent platform to program against no matter what editions you have. Yes, you heard it right. You're going to be able to do the same things in Standard as well as Enterprise. Microsoft has decided after SQL Server 2016 that they would release a new product every 2 years instead of every 5 years. This change in time span removed the option of releasing new features in Service Pack, even though there's a couple minor improvements in Service Packs. That was becoming very confusing, these new features in Service Packs. So Service Packs used to mean here's a list of bugs and fixes and enhancements from the cumulative updates previous to the Service Pack. But between SQL Server 2000, 2005, 8, and 8R2, new features were being released and customers were really being confused. This is no longer the case, and there's an every 2-year release cycle now. So, in SQL Server 2016, those features I like to say are not fully baked. In SQL Server 2012 or 2014 have become more complete in 2016. These features include column store indexes, in-memory tables, and even master data services. You can also get a feel if new features are being used by customers by what they release in future additions to enhance those not fully baked features. Enhancements show that Microsoft has customers using that particular feature, and those customers would look like updates to the features. If there's no new enhancement in a release, this is probably an indicator of not much interest from their customers. But what this also means is some new features in SQL Server 2016 might not be fully baked in this release. This is an indicator to use caution before jumping full production with some new features. Start using the new feature in a development or QA environment first. Try not to plan using it in a new production release of your application. Be cautious and watch Microsoft to see if they're releasing some sort of promotion for this feature in the next version. What's nice about these new features in SQL Server is they are already being tested by millions of users in the cloud. Microsoft went to the mentality of cloud-first development. Some people assumed this meant new features would only be in the cloud, but this has not turned out to be true. Microsoft is fully committed to on-premise SQL Server for those that are not going to the cloud yet. You'll see this especially with the new portal for reporting services and the mobile reports development environment in SSRS. What this has led is to Microsoft being voted the top relational database management system among the peers. There are many industries that are really hyped up on this SQL Server 2016 release. So hyped up that consultants around the world are calling SQL Server 2016 Microsoft's best release to date. Most consultants are telling their customers to upgrade to 2016 rather than 2012 or 2014. This decision is prompted by the cloud testing that is happening before the release to the on-premise version. Less bugs means less problems, and that's good for everybody. Let's look at what Microsoft is saying about 2016. This is from their site for SQL Server 2016. They say, build intelligent mission-critical applications using a scalable hybrid database platform that has everything built in, from in-memory performance and advanced security to in-database analytics. Quite a lot in one sentence, but to kind of split it out a little better, you can see on the bottom that they're touting SQL Server as being an industry-leading software for mission-critical application. Their advanced security is help protecting the data in the ways requested by the community. The end-to-end mobile BI is giving us options to look on our smartphones or tablets for results from our application. And now with the invention of big data analytics, Microsoft is pumping these things into the product directly, which is helping it make a strong push to being used to discover more about all the data that's been collected over the years. And now with Azure, this hybrid cloud lets you write applications that can use a database on-premise and in the cloud. So let's look at the areas of these new features. Of course, the biggest improvements DBAs and developers want to hear about is the database engine. This is the lifeline of online transaction processing systems, or OLTPs. This is where Microsoft and SQL Server is most used. The new version comes with performance tuning tools like live query statistics and the database query data store. The JSON data type has been added, which answers the request from developers just like when they requested an XML data type, which is JSON seems to be replacing that in development shops. Restrictions have been removed from in-memory tables and column store indexes, which can make them more fully baked into the database engine. From the administrative side, there's a new clone database DBCC command, as well as striping backups to Azure. During the installation, there's even a step to help you spread the tempdb files across multiple areas, disk and SANs. What a great help for the installation and configuration. No longer do you need to set the trace flags to spread that data evenly across multiple files in a database. It's actually included in tempdb and other databases now. This is a great part about upgrading. All those trace flags and settings you need to track as a DBA in previous versions are now integrated into the new version. Thank you, Microsoft, for answering those requests. There's a new row-level security implemented for logins. Always encrypted is the new alternative to transparent data encryption, or TDE. TDE was encrypting the whole database, but not the data sent to a client. Always encrypted will encrypt the data from engine to application while using a key to translate it. While data masking is not exactly security related, it does help masking data from certain users when they're directly querying the database. As far as business intelligence, the main change was in reporting services, which has a new modern portal. The new mobile report designer is also available, as well as integrating Power BI files. Analysis Services has some new connection managers, and the T-SQL generated in the background has been updated for performance improvements. In the tabular model, we see new DAX functions, which seems to grow and grow and grow. With Integration Services, or SSIS, the enhancements have to do with deployments to the SSIS catalog. And what this does is let you deploy individual packages in a project rather than the whole project. There's also a not fully baked new feature which lets you create partial packages or components of a package that you can share between packages. Again, it's not fully baked, but you see where Microsoft is going with integration services. Last, we have Advanced Analytics, which starts with the R language. This can be integrated with T-SQL or a standalone open source service. Power BI can use R services. This is only the beginning of analytics in SQL Server. It really started with window functions about 2 releases ago. But just because you're a DBA and you don't think the current skills you have prevent you from learning advanced analytics, you're only going to increase your skill set by installing and learning these new features of SQL Server and what's now called the Microsoft Data Platform. With edition changes, we still have the Enterprise release. This edition, Enterprise, has all features supported by SQL Server. This is the most comprehensive relational database on the market, with capabilities for high availability, support of mission-critical systems, and features to develop fast input and output, virtualization, and even end-to-end business intelligence. And now with the advanced analytics starting with R Server, you see there is so much more to come. Before talking about the Standard Edition, you need to know there is no longer a Business Intelligence Edition. The Standard Edition is a more affordable option for medium and small companies. This gives basic but not limited data management. The business intelligence features are there for on-premise solutions for basic deployments, but without the advanced features of Enterprise. But with Service Pack 1, those programmability options are available in Standard Edition that were once only available in Enterprise. The Web Edition is still mainly used to support websites with a data management system. The selling point is for low-cost functioning for web hosting. This is for small to large-scale web applications. This is not for a web database application, but for the supporting of websites and their content. The Developers Edition can be obtained for free while signing up for Visual Studio Essentials, which is also free. SQL Server 2016 Developers Edition for Service Pack 1 is free without even signing up for Essentials. All capabilities in Enterprise Edition can be used with the Developers Edition, but licensing for the Developers Edition is limited to just development or QA environments. It is not to be used for production deployment. Express Edition is mainly for small systems, less than 10 connections or desktop deployments. The limitations are mainly CPUs, memory, business intelligence, and advanced features. Programming with T-SQL, XML, JSON, in-memory tables, and even Management Studio are all available once you install Service Pack 1 for Express Edition, just like Standard Edition. The high availability, enhanced performance, and security are very basic, but still affordable in this edition. So now let's look at a demonstration on the internet with Internet Explorer of some of what we just talked about. There are many resources from Microsoft. You just have to find them in order to enable to interpret what has changed in SQL Server 2016. So this first site is Additions and Components of SQL Server 2016. If you notice, in the middle of the screen, there's even a roll down or drop down to show other versions. So Microsoft has kind of consolidated their way of displaying information so you can look at it between versions. We're going to stick to 2016. The first thing we see is a link to additions and supported features, which we'll look at in just a second. But first, let's kind of scroll down, and it's going to give you a summary of Enterprise, Standard, Web, and Developer, as well as Enterprise Edition. It's going to talk about the same things we mentioned before, but here is Microsoft's official definitions of these. As we scroll down further, we'll get an information about using SQL Server as an internet server and a little note about that. It'll also tell you about using it with client-server applications and direct you to the installation of SQL Server 2016. You're also going to want to decide during installation the components that you want to install. Microsoft's broken it down to database engine, analysis services, reporting services, and integrated services, as well as master data services and R services. So you can see each one of these has really its own development track and are separate from each other and separate during the installation. You can install them all during the installation, but there is a separation of that. The next big thing they're going to talk about are the management tools. Management Studio is the main area for DBAs to configure, manage, administer, and develop stuff with databases in SQL Server. There's a configuration manager which lets you change ports or logins and passwords associated with the services. There's a profiler to do analysis. There's even a database engine tuning advisor, which has been greatly upgraded since previous versions. Before, it would leave a lot of leftover statistics. That's no longer the case. You also have a data quality client along with a service and data tools. This is the Visual Studio shell that helps you develop integration services, analysis services, as well as reporting service, in addition to some database projects and even a schema and data compare. During the installation, you also have connectivity components, so you want to take a look at those. The next website we're going to look at are the additions of SQL Server and their features. They've already updated this site to include SB1, so they're really pushing Service Pack 1. Of course, you have your Enterprise, Standard, Express, and Developer Edition, and links to learn more information. But here's where you can compare the Enterprise, Standard, Express, and Developer based on main features. In the administrative part is more of the limitations of the versions or the additions. And you can see there's core limitations, memory, max memory for column store, and there's even a separate memory area for in-memory tables and column store that is outside of the data cache. You can see maximum data sizes for databases, and then you'll see the Enterprise, Standard, and Express almost has exact same things in the programming area. But when you look at the transactional systems, you'll see those differences, especially with more advanced high availability features. Also, the data management of master data services, data quality services is only in Enterprise. You get the basic advanced security, but not some of all the encryption types. In the data warehousing scheme, it's almost all the same, except maybe some limitations on size. But the basic reporting and analysis is there, the integrated services, and the in-memory and column store information is there. With reporting, you get the reporting services in almost all editions, but things like mobile reports and KPIs are excluded, as well as the advanced connections for analysis services. R can be developed across, except the advanced parallel part of R is not available. The hybrid options, which include stretch database, are there in all versions. So then we also have one where if you want to get started in SQL Server, the best thing is to go download the Developer Edition. There's a link to sign up for Visual Studio Dev Essentials, which will give you SQL Server 2016 Developers Edition for free. There's a free sign up. You can read about the licensing of the Developers Edition, but if you go straight to Service Pack 1 for the Developers Edition, you will be able to download it for free without signing up for Dev Essentials. Now let's talk about system requirements. This involves hardware as well as software. The system requirements are very important. With newer operating systems, changes from 32-bit to 64-bit you must know about. What this hardware and software is required is really helpful to know before doing an installation. SQL Server 2016 is not different than any other software application. The server installation will need to be on an OS that has network software support and access to an Active Directory for optimal security. The version of Windows Server you use depends on the number of CPUs and/or RAM you want available for SQL Server 2016. Older versions of Windows servers are more restrictive in this area. There's even now push to get SQL Server to run on Linux systems. But before running the installation program, there's still a need to manually install the .NET Framework 3.5 version. The desktop installation for Express or Developers Edition will need Windows 8 or higher. There is a new memory requirement of at least 1 gig of RAM, except with Express Edition, and that requirement is for 512 megabytes of RAM. With the x64 processors now, you need a minimum of a 1.4 gigahertz to run SQL Server installation, but the recommendations are much higher. For client tools, all will work on 64-bit servers and client, but some client tools of SQL Server still support 32-bit versions and lower gigahertz. Management Studio now for 2016 needs .NET 4.6 framework. You need to have this installed, or during the installation it will download install as a support feature. SQL Server Management Studio, or SSMS, is the main client application to manage SQL Server. So now let's look at a demonstration of looking at software and hardware requirements through the internet and Microsoft's official site. Again, at this site for hardware and software requirements, you'll see you can look at other versions just like the other websites. They tell you when it's published and updated, and even give you some areas to download and even try SQL Server 2016 on a virtual machine. Then they give some upfront recommendations of things that have been patterns in the operating system and support world. This includes trying to run it through a remote desktop connection, blocking installations because of read-only drives, not using FAT32, which is an old file system because it's not as secure. And then they also talk about some of the native client support as well as some of the support files. There's actually minimum requirements for certain versions, which we'll look at in a second, but then this website's divided into a bunch of different areas. The first one is the hardware and software requirements. The requirement of .NET Framework 4.6 for some of the features, as well as the client, the fact that you need a network software to run SQL Server 2016, which most Windows Server versions have this, and then some information about the hard disk. And there's a bunch of varieties of how hard disks are presented to servers nowadays. If you need a DVD, what kind of monitor you might need, and if you need some sort of internet functionality. Sometimes on servers, the admins block through a firewall access to the internet. So you need to make sure you can do certain things, especially if you're downloading files off the internet for the installation. Then they'll go into the processor, memory, and operating system requirements. Here they'll give a minimum for memory as well as a recommended memory setting. They do the same thing for processor speeds and even type of processors. Here they enforce the use of x64 processors for the services of SQL Server, but you'll see in a second that's different than the client tools. They're also going to talk about WOW64 support, which helps enables the 32-bit running on 64-bit machines. There's also a minimum requirement of 2 gigs of RAM for data quality services if you're adding that. So each of the services features as you add to the installation is going to bump up the memory requirements of the machine itself, unless you decide to put it on a separate machine. There's also information about installing reporting services in SharePoint or the add-in for SharePoint components. Then they talk about the features supported on 32-bit client operating systems. So not all client machines have 64-bit version, and that's okay because some of these client tools still support and run on 32-bit systems. Then we get to the principal operating system supported for each edition, and they start with Enterprise, which can range from 2016 Data Center all the way down to 2012 Foundation. They talk about the Standard Edition, and then there's additional operating systems that can run Standard Edition, and as well as web, there's more of a limited area of installations. But then when you get to the SQL Server Developer Edition, you have a bunch of more things that you can run operating system wide for these versions, as well as the Express Edition. There's information and a link about cross-language support, and then they detail the hard disk space requirements for each feature and client part that you install on SQL Server, and it ranges in size from over a gig to sometimes 200 to 300 megs. So be mindful of these disk requirements before doing an installation. And then they'll dig more into the storage types. These are the disks that are going to support the bits of SQL Server, as well as the data, the file streaming, and even the analysis services part. So they give you areas to read so you can make sure everything with your admin is in sync for using SQL Server 2016. And lastly, on this website, they're going to warn you of some things of installing SQL Server on a domain controller. Basically, you shouldn't do that, but if you have to, there's some things that you need to know. By releasing Service Pack 1, the change to have a programming surface across all editions was important to Microsoft. The community and users spoke, and Microsoft listened. Most of the features like column store, JSON data type, in-memory tables are available in all editions, except the features that need the SQL Server agent to run jobs. This is mainly features like change data capture and the components, which uses things in replication. That is also the effect of replication. Because it uses a SQL Server agent, it will not be able to run on the Express Edition. This is because that agent is where the jobs run, and Express and Local DB editions don't have this agent. Let's look a little deeper into these programmability options. Security features like row-level access, data masking, and even always encrypted will work across all editions in their basic form, when before it was only available in Enterprise. Administrative features like database snapshot, table/index partitioning will improve performance but require more advanced DBA knowledge to support. Column store indexes and in-memory tables are becoming more the norm with the decreases in memory for servers. It's good that these are now available in the Standard Edition. Compression and auditing help the DBA support with compliance requests, and this eases the burden between the DBA group and the compliance group. With big data features, Polybase is now available with SQL Server, and Polybase helps shops quickly and easily get into the wide open data storage support like Hadoop systems. But remember, local DB and Express do not have the SQL Server agent, so features like Change Data Capture or CDC, Polybase, and some file stream enhancements will need at least the standard edition. Now we're going to go to the Internet Explorer and look at a blog about the Service Pack 1 release. With the exclamation points in the title, they are really excited about this release. With this cloud-first strategy, they talk about how these features need to be spread across all editions. Because Azure is set up a little bit different than your on-premise, some of these things need to be available to kind of support all areas of development in the cloud. So the benefit is the on-premise gets these versions. Also, Service Pack 1 comes with an important security update. Security update MS16-136. It's in cumulative update 3 if you don't want to put Service Pack 1 out there, but it is an important part of the Service Pack 1 release. The other thing it's going to do in this blog is give you kind of a table of what's available. And if you see, the RTM versus SB1 has a lot more no's than yeses. So the yeses are now all over the SP1 product, which should make a lot of people excited. I love the data masking, the capture data change data capture, which I've used in even SQL Server 2012. That database snapshot support, as well as partitioning, compression, and even the new in-memory features are really exciting. So after this table, it's going to give you a little more details about what this gives you. It's also going to talk about the class memory support in Windows Server 2016, the database cloning, which lets you clone database with statistics, without, with the query store, without, so you can actually move the performance testing to another machine without losing all the queries and statistics that were involved in it. You also see things like the addition of a create and alter on certain DDL type statements, the using of hints and queries, along as a bunch of other more program type support. So go to this blog and read about the Service Pack 1 enhancements and all the individual details about what's been released in Service Pack 1. I think if you haven't installed SQL Server 2016 yet, you're going to want to install it with Service Pack 1.